At the beginning of the 20th century, the Algerian nationalist movement was born. At the time, there was a large wave of Kabyle emigration to France, and the number of migrants kept increasing from year to year. This emigration was caused by the misery of dispossessed peasants and the endemic unemployment of agricultural workers. In the early 20th century, the Kabyles formed the vast majority of Algerian workers in France. By learning French and encountering modern ideas, these workers discovered new forms of political struggle. Working long hours for pitiful wages, and exploited both as colonial subjects and as proletarians, they began to recognize the full extent of their oppression. It was in this context that the Congress of North African Workers of the Paris region was born on December 7, 1924 in Paris. At that time, there were around 100,000 Algerian workers in France, most of them of Kabyle origin. In 1926, the Congress of North African Workers of the Paris region became the Étoile Nord-Africaine, or the ENA. The Étoile Nord-Africaine, meaning the North African Star, was an association demanding the independence of North Africa by advocating for social progress. 5 of the 8 founders were Kabyle, and so were most of the activists, prompting French historian Roger Le Tourneau to remark, "We would have done better to call it the Algerian Star, or even the Kabyle Star." In 1927, the Kabyles elected an Arabic speaker to the presidency, Messali Haj. This choice is linked to the search for solidarity between Berbers and Arabs in the national liberation struggle. The Association of Algerian Muslim Ulema is a religious association created in 1931, whose famous motto is, "Islam is my religion, Arabic is my language, Algeria is my homeland." It represents the Arabo-Islamic trend in the Algerian national movement, of which it constitutes one of the main components. For the Ulema, the Berber people do not exist, since in their view, they are undergoing a process of total and irreversible Arabization. The Ulema seek to neutralize anyone who might attempt to obstruct this Arabization. They proclaim that through Islam, we will Arabize Algeria. Whoever strays from the Arabic language also strays from the worship of God, and whoever strays from the worship of God incurs terrible punishment from him. Thus, the Arab elite of the Maghreb refuses, for ideological and religious reasons, to perceive the divisive objectives pursued by the colonialists. From the beginning, the Ulema were not separatists, but reformist nationalists. In other words, they did not pursue national independence for the Algerian people, but rather fought for political reforms without separating from the colonial empire. Amar, Secretary General of the ENA and of Kabyle origin, denounces the Ulema for believing that Algeria's liberation must first pass through its attachment to France. On July 7, 1934, a prominent ENA spokesman, Ahmed Yahyoui, a man of Kabyle origin, issued a statement. Evoking the Kabyle insurrections of the previous century, he explains that Algeria would have remained free if the Arabs had been united with the Kabyles. It will be the mission of the North African Star to achieve this union from which victory will emerge. During the General Assembly of May 28, 1933, the members of the North African Star clarified and deepened the doctrine of the party. The party's program, as stated in 1933, included the total independence of Algeria, a constituent assembly elected by universal suffrage, the return of confiscated lands to peasants, and the restitution of lands and forests seized by the French Empire to the Algerian state. During this General Assembly, the Kabyles rose to prominent positions. Men such as Amar, Belkacem Rajif, Sijilanian, and others were given powerful roles within the organization. Convinced that the social, political, and economic structures of Berber society can give independent Algeria a social and democratic character, Amar has long argued for the inclusion of these institutions, namely L'Arsh, which are the collective lands of village communities, and Tejmath, which is the elected village assembly. These explicit references to Berber socio-cultural characteristics that Kabyle leaders are trying to integrate into the national movement will arouse distrust and suspicion on the part of their Arabo-Islamist companions. Subjected to constant repression from the French government, the ENA was dissolved in November 1934, and the main leaders, Messaly, Imesh, and Rajif, were arrested. Upon his release a few months later, Messaly took refuge in Switzerland from the fall of 1935 to the summer of 1936. In Geneva, he met Chki Berslan. Messaly has always been an Arabo-Islamic nationalist. From the beginning, he drew his social ideas from the Quran, unlike his companion and future adversary, Amar who borrowed them from Berber tradition. However, in Geneva, Chki Berslan influenced Messaly by creating ties between him and the ulama, and therefore encouraging him to renounce the demand for national independence. A break with his Kabyle companions then becomes inevitable. Messaly provokes this rupture at the first opportunity. The ENA was dissolved again on January 26, 1937 by the French government. Messaly, the only Arabic speaker within the leadership, took advantage of the dissolution of the ENA to create, on March 11, 1937, a new organization, the Parti du Peuple Algérien, or the PPA, meaning the Algerian People's Party. Its program stipulates that the Algerian People's Party will work for the total emancipation of Algeria without separating it from France. The PPA claims that Muslims have never harbored separatist intentions against France, from whom they demand fair and humane treatment within the framework of French laws. The PPA program will announce the break between Messaly and Imesh. Amar denounces the new reformist program of the PPA and considers it a setback in relation to the national independence program of the ENA. He refuses to join the new party and invites activists to do the same. Messaly made no secret of his intention to distance himself from Kabyle leaders and align more closely with the ulama. In June 1937, Messaly transferred the headquarters of the PPA to Algeria. A month later, the Algiers Federation of the PPA was formed. Messaly is appointed president of the new executive committee. Composed mainly of men unconnected to the ENA or linked to the ulama, the steering committee of the PPA broke with the Kabyle leaders and therefore sought to reduce their role and importance in the governing bodies of the PPA. The arrest of Messaly and other leaders on August 27, 1937 will strengthen his prestige and that of his party in the eyes of the Algerian masses. After his second arrest on October 4, 1939, Messaly becomes in the eyes of the masses the very incarnation of nationalism. Algerian nationalism, having become centered around the figure of Messaly, broadened its social base towards the middle class, with the Arabo-Islamic ideology playing a major influence. Islam, seen as the best tool to unify the party and sustain mass resistance to colonialism, became the rallying point for its diverse social, political, and ethnic components. Thus, Arabo-Islamism will constitute the doctrine of the Messalist movement. Deprived of financial means and lacking international support, revolutionary Kabyle nationalists cannot effectively oppose Messalism, especially since the Kabyle population, living in tragic socioeconomic conditions, adheres en masse to the PPA. During a report in Kabylia, in June 1939, French writer Albert Camus wrote, "One early morning, in Tizi Ouzou, I saw children in rags fighting with Kabyle dogs over the contents of a trash can. To my questions, a Kabyle replied, 'It's like that every morning.' I think I can say that at least 50% of the population eats grass and roots. Half of the Kabyle population is unemployed, and 3/4 are undernourished. I am obliged to say that the labor regime in Kabylia is one of slave labor, for I see no other word to describe a system in which workers toil for 10 to 12 hours per day for an average wage of 6 to 10 francs. The Kabyle's support for the PPA can be explained by the poverty in Kabylia and the repression that has befallen the party since its establishment in Algeria. During this period, a new generation of nationalists, completely ignoring the conflicts of their elders, emerged within the movement. After sidelining the first generation of Kabyle nationalist leaders, the old guard of the movement adopted the same tactics: suspicion, religious propaganda, denunciation, and authoritarianism. These practices targeted the new wave of Kabyle revolutionaries, ultimately triggering the Berberist crisis of 1949.